Okay, welcome to the Seattle Code Crafters Meetup. My name is Paige Watson. I'm here with Steve Kuo, and our meetup is a language agnostic meetup for those people who are interested in making our craft better, building better software, better ways of doing it, figuring out not necessarily the right way, but what's the next better way. Today we have my friend Trace Wax with us. Trace is I'm just going to read your bio because it's easier. You're a fractional CTO at Barefoot Coders, and you're currently teaching at Columbia, although unfortunately I heard that's finishing soon.
Oh, no, well, the semester's finishing soon,
Okay,
back in the
awesome.
fall.
Right.
But yeah, I adjunct at Columbia, which is turned into a full-time thing.
Okay.
And that's what I'm doing right now until April, available for hire in May.
All right. So that's excellent. Um, uh, also, Scott Werner, did I pronounce that right, Scott? Yeah,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
And I'll let you introduce him a little more, Trace, in a minute. I just want to say I saw your post on Blueprints, and I'm not a Ruby developer, but I went and tried it out, and it was fun, and it was excellent. And probably if I was doing Ruby, I'd be super more excited about it. But
Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Blueprints are only going to work in Ruby forever. Like, we're all just returning to Ruby. This won't work in any other language.
It's for everybody. It's language agnostic. It's for everybody. It's really
for everybody. It's like it's all inclusive.
It's all inclusive.
Thanks, Paige. No,
Yeah.
we're thrilled to be here. And this first came about is like I was starting to tell people just a couple of minutes ago. I've always been a futurist and been working on like VR and blockchain and even space tech, and our lecture that we're preparing for tonight at Columbia is on brain computer interface. Like I want to help create the future. And when ChatGPT came out, with in full force, with everybody's awareness in November of 2022, it's like, oh, this is going to change everything. I need to start including this in my workflows pretty much everywhere. Scott and I were talking about this at about the same time. I was fortunate to get to work on my old company's AI tool and saw like how quickly it could do things, but how much we're going to change how things would work, and realized how the principles that we follow as a long time. XPeer was a Pivotal Labs developer, led a couple of consultancies, ThoughtBot, and then the New York office of another XP consultancy called Artium. Left in October, started teaching full time, and started getting really involved in how is this going to change how we all work. Developed a workshop on that we can talk about at the end. And Scott and I talk on the regular because he's working on these sorts of things full time. And whenever one of these new tools comes out, just like on the daily, and talking to Scott, so what do you think of Devin? What do what's I was just used to everything, and now there's something completely different. Like, how do I make sense of this? And Scott's the person that I go to first. And yeah, I definitely wanted to pull you into this conversation. We're going to handle it like a bit of a fireside. I've got some questions. We're going to first, I want to everyone to know just a little bit, Scott, about who you are, and then we can start to get to know who we all are. Scott, I'm curious if you can start to tell some of your own story. Like, can you walk us through your path through software development and leadership? Like, what's your supervillain story of origin?
Yeah, so let's see. So my supervillain story of origin starts at the very beginning. My first programming job was at a design agency that had been around for a while, had built their own custom CMS, and I was just happy to get my foot in the door. And 2 months into it, all the other developers at the place quit, and I was alone to support all of the past projects and all of the new upcoming projects. And so kind of had to just kind of hit the ground running and just find different ways to get things done and kind of come up with my own processes. But like throughout I guess the next year or so there, Had some successes, some failures, but like throughout it was thinking like there's got to be a better way to do what I'm doing. We were doing like a project would start, I would get a Photoshop file of all the designs and be like, all right, this project needs done in 3 months. I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out. And then, life kind of took me up to New York. I ended up at a startup called Sidetour, which Trace also worked at. And the CTO there was from Pivotal Labs. They had test driven the entire app, pair programmed, and it was like one of those things where there was a huge hole in my process, and XP just like kind of fit right in. It was like it felt like I found what I was missing in life. And so that's my origin story. There was an XP sized hole missing in my professional life, and found it.
That makes sense. And so then, how did that take you forward? I know that, we got to work together a bit when you were, with that massive group, but Groupon after Sidetour got bought. And then, you kept all the best people, including hiring some of the best people away that I used to work with.
That's right.
So what happened then?
Yeah, so we were acquired by Groupon, and I found myself in a management role. And I guess taking a step back, like through Sidetour, we had a bunch of ex pivots come in and consult, and so I got a chance to like just people way further down the line, much better pairers than me, much better testers than me. And so basically, my experience was just don't ask questions, just look at what they do and try to copy what they're doing, and kind of almost like shuhari before I knew what shuhari was. Just see what they do, see what works, and copy it. And so when I got to a management role and had a bunch of junior developers and they were asking me, why do you do this? Why do you do that? I was frozen basically. And it was like, I had a stupid line that she probably shouldn't have said. It was like, a good developer doesn't know why they do anything. And knew that was not a satisfying answer. And so took a step back and started to like dig into like all of the old literature. What are all of the agile literature, all of the ideas that they pulled from, and kind of really did like a historical deep dive for a lot of it. And that's kind of where I ended up now, of kind of reading the ancient texts, I guess.
Totally fair. So when you managed to escape through your latest acquisition following these amazing people, and then you led this team at Adobe, you're getting that was it the podcasts now?
Yep.
App that you're leading engineering for that. And so then, what took you into startup land, and what was your journey to software development with AI in the loop?
Yeah, so I mean, I've kind of always been a startup person, and so always drawn to it, and had an opportunity through the network I built here in the city, and kind of jumped at it. But particularly when I saw people building, when GPT-4 first came out, and people were like posting videos, posting everything about, I took this prompt, I put it into ChatGPT, and I copy and pasted this code into Xcode, and I have a running app, and I've never programmed anything before in my life. I quickly kind of realized that those people are going to want to change that software over time, and throwing a giant prompt with like, oh, and also add this feature in, wasn't like the greatest process. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized like a lot of the reason why we do certain things that we do, those reasons also apply to AI. And so it pretty much started out with like, if we break this problem down, the AI is really good at it. And the smaller this problem is, the faster the response you're going to get, the less detail or the less places it can do things wrong. And so with just like that start of the insight, it was like, let's go, there's something here. And it came up with a whole bunch of like, pithy quotes around that stuff of like, Steve Yagi has a great post that I've definitely cribbed from, of, well, aren't isn't the code unreliable? Like, how can you really trust the code here? And his point was like, yeah, but you can't trust the code that we write. Like, we pair, we write tests, we have CI, like, we're unreliable. And like, that definitely like kind of reinforced the, the things that we all do are still important, if not take on more importance as like we start to have these, these black boxes that are also writing software for us.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, my story of origin very similar when I was working on this project. Like I thought that we need principles like XP more than ever. And that's really what we're going to talk about, today is about those principles, about how you're applying it, how it was Lee Edwards who was who brought both me and you into Sidetour, that it was his VC that funded you to look into this with Sublayer, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, have a great partner, and like as we're one of the things that we had talked about early on was you can kind of think about a user story as a prompt to get a human software developer to write software. And that did well with a handful of people, and we started to dig into that, and like quickly got to a point where we were like, well, do we actually call these stories anymore? Because like some attributes were different, but there was definitely like a what's the word? There was definitely a tell there that like we were already, the line of like a story is a placeholder for a conversation, and the interface for a lot of these models is the conversational interface, which is definitely raised some eyebrows.
Be interesting as well. And was mind blown that people that big architecture upfront people are also getting a huge win out of AI. So we all are. I'm kind of curious which principles, why our principles. I think in order to have an effective conversation here, I'd love to get to know everyone who's here a little bit and pull the group a little bit. So I'd be curious, like if we could all just put in the chat real quick. First off, like what percentage of our time do we spend hands-on keyboard, like actively creating software ourselves, either by ourselves or in a pair, in a mob, or in a group? So for each of us, like what percentage of your time are you presently hands-on keyboard? Yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna put, like, for me, it's probably about 5% right now. I'm not out of it. So 1, dang. Now we're on 2, yeah. 90, 20. I'm not seeing any 0. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, Don, we got a 0.
That's perfect. Don and Claire right next
so
to each other.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, that a lot of that makes sense, that it comes and goes absolutely. But it seems like the audience here is pretty technical. Is anyone here would describe yourself as post-technical or non-technical at all? Like, has anyone here never coded? I'm not hearing any of that. So that makes sense, kind of given the crowd. So that's good to know.
And it's admitted if you're not too. We welcome all here.
That's good to know. That's fair. Yeah, and if anything's tough to follow, feel free to ask questions afterwards, or we can message in the chat while I'm talking. So non-technical about AI/ML. This talk is also fairly non-technical about AI/ML. We're not going to be talking about which particular model or algorithm we're going to be using. I'd be surprised if that comes up today at all. That barely comes up in the AI/ML class that I'm teaching.
Yeah, and I actually kind of also find it very, I frame myself as like focused on applied AI, and like I try to keep myself, it's hard not to like pick up some of the technical details, but like I find it helpful to kind of treat these as a black box as we explore them. So try to stay away from the technical side, or the deep tech side of it.
And if you ever want to, like, when's the last time any of you like went through a Jupyter notebook? Like, for our class, we started doing that, and just it's the whole data science community has all these amazing scripts, just things you just kind of click play, play around with it. click play again, and then you can get under the covers some of what we're using. The next percentage, yeah, totally. The next percentage I want to ask you about is, for the code that you do write, or your work if you don't code, what percentage of it was created in some form of collaboration with AI? And like for my code, it's probably about 50%. And for my work, about the same. I'm trying to get that to 100. I had something pretty complicated today. It would have taken me way longer. So a bunch of zeros, bunch of 50%.
Does IntelliSense or Code Complete and snippets count as AI?
For the purposes of this prompt, no.
Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So I'm going to rephrase the question, which is, what percentage of your code was creation with some form of collaboration with generative AI? Steve, thank you for helping me be more specific. So how much is AI assistant? So 10s, 50s. And a bunch of zeros, totally fair. So for those of us participating, and hopefully everyone, I would next like to ask, what is the top reason that this number is not 100%? And, I'll say, for myself, for example, don't have the right tool handy, maybe. But what's the top reason why you are not using AI, 100% or 80% of the time? FP, yep, less effective. So let's go ban company policy, let a company. Well-crafted code, Steve, that makes sense. Yep, refactor to make it good takes longer than it does by hand. Doesn't work well, no good use case. Claire, can you talk about your lack of trust for just a second? If you're comfortable doing so. This was a question for Claire McRae, if you can hear me. Next person I want to prompt. And pardon my pronunciation, Claire, I totally get it. Is it yeah, Yosian Chevalier?
It's yeah, Josian. So close enough.
Fair. Cool. Wasn't sure how much you Americanized the but tell me about
anyway, it would work. Joe works. So
Yeah.
for me, I have sorry, I'm giving a baby bottle at the same time. It's a little difficult. When I'm writing in the domain, I have very strict standard regarding what I'm doing. I have a lot of helpers. I have a lot of my code that is hidden behind specific interfaces for whatever might be technical. I also use a lot of TDD, so I progress kind of softly. And AI is not good yet at writing code that is very geometric for one domain, at knowing what you have to abstract at which level. And it also doesn't work well with TDD because it wants to solve the entire problem right away. It doesn't approach it with small steps.
And that makes sense. So Stephen and Paige, yours were pretty similar, and I know we were talking about that before most of us jumped on. Can you tell us, to the extent that you're comfortable, why is AI working or not working for you in your own workflow?
So for me, it's been for well-crafted code, I'm talking about writing code in Smalltalk style, micro objects, extensive use of design patterns. Coming in, it does not know it can create a simple strategy if other strategies have been created. But if you've got a builder that is building a chain of responsibility of those strategies, heads explode. I can almost hear the CPUs popping in some remote destination. Playing around with it with refactoring things, and I test the boundaries. I'm playing with things. I know that it takes the minimum code coverage for Gilded Rose to say, give me the tests for this is 5 tests, and I have yet to find an generative AI code tool that gives me full coverage of 12 to 13 tests for it. So I don't trust it. Number one, trust but verify. I want to use it. The inline code syntax suggestions are mostly good and have been good from what I've seen. But when I start throwing it well-crafted code, it explodes, and what it tells me to do is objectively wrong.
That makes sense. Jay, because I was going to prompt you next anyway. How's that? Tell me about this prompt that it seems like you just wrote.
Yeah, I thought of it yesterday. Haven't gotten to explore it very much, but it's based on some of the same concerns I just heard. That when we offered a prompt with a test, it wants to solve the entire problem, and I want to just solve this one test. And so I thought maybe I could say this and get a narrower result. And with the 2 test cases I've tried so far, it seemed to do that, but I want to explore more.
Scott, you look like you really want something.
Awesome. I was actually going to type something in here before you called on him. That there's, and this is complete sidetrack, but something I've tried recently that's been really fun is that we found Claude is really receptive to role-playing different scenarios. And I had a role-playing scenario with Claude recently where I had it, simulate a pairing session, a TDD pairing session between 2 people going step by step. And it followed that. So rather than like asking it to write the code or like write code that passes the single test that I have here, of like just have it walk through a whole situation, telling it next, and it will somewhat receptive to that, which is shocking.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have kind of played around with having different agents talk to each other. At my old job, we were doing that in a single prompt, but we would actually set up an entire agile team, including different personalities of developers, and one was a rogue and one was really conservative, and there's a PM who just wanted to get stuff done, and a manager who got everything just never there. And we would just kind of have them chat, and you could actually read the conversations, and would use that to generate the epics and user stories that it was producing. It was pretty cool. Let's see. So also, Jay, you're talking about just more effort requires than it saves, and who Cody U100 did that. Cody, can you tell me about your experience about it being just taking more than it gives?
Yeah, I think part of it for me has been, and I think who wrote this comment? I'm probably gonna butcher your names. I'm sorry, but is it Josian? Somebody wrote this comment that is awesome, that I pretty much agree, which is writing the test. So again, doing TDD, we're kind of coming up with that initial design. We're coming up with the test. That's the hard part. Once I have that, the implementation, if I try to follow Yagni, you ain't going to need it. Really try to make the implementation as simple as possible. And usually that's pretty straightforward as the design kind of, I don't know. It goes back to the design skill. If you have the design of making it really small, it's simple, the implementation ends up being really simple. I can implement it faster than the AI can. Has been the examples that I've had when I have the knowledge of what I'm trying to do. Now, there's times where I don't exactly know what I'm trying to do, and that's where I found a lot of use with AI. But Paige, you have your hand up.
I do, and I want to just kind of add to like Jay's prompt there. It's in the work that I've been trying to learn about how to work with generative AI and that sort of thing. It really kind of strikes me that we almost have to learn like a new programming language, and that language is the prompts that we will use as developers to get the right code out of it. And that's, I think, the biggest part when we talk about like, well, it solves the problem. Will it just, I write a test, or, I ask it to propose tests for this one class that I've written, and it gives me 7,000 if else statements in one test with 2,800, asserts. Like, so that's, I like Jay's prompt there, and I'd love to kind of learn how we incorporate our skills and our ability and our sort of requirements as quality developers to write the smallest test possible to change the code, and then write the smallest test possible, or the smallest code to fix the test type of practice, and all those other quality practices.
Yeah, and that's when I first started getting involved with it, and even still, that's kind of the perspective that I've had, is like, especially a lot of us in the software craft community, and I'm somewhat new to the community, maybe 2, 3, 4 years in. And I came from, I always saw there being two branches of extreme programming. There was the Pivotal Labs diaspora and everyone else. And that the everyone else community, closer to the crafters community, was much more pure about applying the principles. Was it, I don't know if Kent had said this, but or if he would have, but if you're following the book in 2 weeks, you're not following the book. Whereas where in a Shuhari world, Pivotal Labs people were stuck at Shu, like an imitate. You never got to assimilate or innovate. And so from that perspective, I'd stayed very, very close to it. My initial work with this was just getting it to follow as close to Pivotal's very pure XP kata from their script, which I found worked really well and was able to guide it in some of the ways you're talking about, Paige. Matt?
Yeah, it seems like some of the comments I'm hearing are taking us in the direction of, I can get the AI to do it if I talk about it in the right way, or if I make the problem small enough. And this comes back to something I think about when I'm talking about coaching, is one of the biggest challenges we have with software developers, even with human beings, is that decomposition. Can you envision a problem in the right way? And you think about a junior first level programmer, if you give them a bunch of tests, they're going to try to implement the whole thing in a bunch of really weird nested if else statements, just like the AI would do. So an AI is no different in capability from a untrained first year out of school program. And then, so in that case, part of the challenge might be, in the value is, the AI can be a really good enhancement to our capabilities if we're able to use our programming ability to break down the problem into small enough pieces, and a well-phrased problem statement is indistinguishable from the solution. Give the AI the prompt, and it solves that little tiny piece, but the larger connective tissue is the programmer value.
No, that makes sense. And also, part of what we're going to talk about today, and what I love about working with you, Scott, is like how much you've kind of gone through that part of the imitate journey, and you're somewhere between Ha and Rudy, and you're like, oh, okay, what happened before may not work the way that we expect. Like, we love these principles, they're more important than ever, but the world is just going to be wildly different, and the constraints are really different. Before we get to that, Ron, kind of last question before we move on.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on Matt's comment and ask Matt a question of, have you tried, and thus any of you, have you tried to ask the AI to break down the problem into small pieces?
That is the next experiment. There are people who are doing it. I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, I love it for refactoring, for example. Like, you can just say, hey, refactor this code, and it does it, and it doesn't tell you why. But it's like, what if you ask, what are the top 5 ways you would refactor this code? All right, let's do the first one, then the next, then the next. And you're there kind of with your pair, following along with it as a bit of a guide. Then it's kind of accommodating you as a human, and you're kind of optimizing for code understanding, which, for what we're going to talk about, may be a bit of an anti-goal. And there's a whole bunch of sacred cows that we may be about to kill, but a bunch of others that we're about to feed and turn up to 1,000. So what I'd love to ask you next about, let's see, I wanted to ask.
We can
good
jump in and should we just jump right into? It seems like there's some questions dancing around, and we're putting off the.
Let's get to the meat of it. All right. So yeah, let's definitely jump in. Do you want to talk about principles, or do you just want to show code?
We can do. Let's work our way to principles. So I was dancing around. So like one of the things that we've been talking about and here is, when we started digging into what is it going to mean to work with AI, what is it going to mean to program with AI, we kind of started to ask the question of what that or kind of had the realization that there's going to be there are going to be patterns, there are going to be architectures, languages, frameworks, etc., that lend themselves really well to the AI writing the code, and then there are going to be things that don't. And we had kind of started to package that as, and calling it internally, a promptable architecture. And I think like that's a little bit of kind of like what we're getting at here is that what are those things, right? Tracy.
No. I'm good.
Okay.
Like, all right. So maybe it would help if we kind of told you guys kind of some of what we're going to talk about. There are basically two concepts. One that Scott, that you've developed, and are kind of you're leading not just the thought but the practice on, and they're promptable architecture and this other thing called blueprints. And just to get into promptable architecture, like, so what is it? How does it relate to software principles? Like, maybe you just kind of give us a primer on promptable architecture, and then after you do, could you show us an example of what that looks like?
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, so I think some of the stuff that we've already kind of touched on around breaking the problem down into small pieces, refactoring, things like that. We're kind of the starting point, but like kind of took it even a step further. So like, and what are the principles? Why are we breaking this down? What makes this code testable? And so some of those things we found worked really well, like loosely coupled code, clear interfaces. I think some people have mentioned here around like it will jump ahead and write a whole bunch of stuff. So like breaking, how do we get the AI to not just write a whole bunch? And that was kind of like what some of the first things that we discovered, that like loose coupling and conciseness, clear interfaces, the things that you would want in testable code, the AI was very good at for kind of a lot of the reasons that it's good at, or for a lot of the reasons that for a lot of the reasons why it's testable in the first place, that you don't have a lot of setup, you don't have to write a lot. It's very clear what you're trying to do. That code is really easy to test for. You don't have to write a big prompt if you don't have to write as big of a prompt. If you have to write, this class is this dependency is that, do these side effects, do this, do that, your prompt is very big, and it creates a lot of opportunity for the AI to kind of go off the rails. Let's see.
I wanted to ask you also, like, what about principles like that? Can you think of any principles that we like to love that matter less in an AI world?
Yeah,
Spoiler.
so like, I'm sorry?
Oh, no, I am a plant.
Yeah, like we can do so like some of the things, like as we've gone down that path and started building, and which we'll get to some demos shortly, of turning some of these principles up to 11, like Trace mentioned. Is like, if this code is extremely loosely coupled, if if the interfaces are very clean, if it's short, and you've created an application in this way, some things kind of become less important. One of the first things that we built was give up our favorite language for the paper. One of the first things that we built was this, putting this to work was an agent framework that, we had these individual tasks. And so we started the week, started to prioritize the stuff that we were working on, and, spent hour working through the stories, prioritizing them. And, an hour later came back and we're like, yeah, we've kind of done all these things because we had the code just generate we had the AI just generate this code. And so we started to, pull on that thread. And, if, in a world where it takes me more time to coordinate than to actually it takes both of us more time to coordinate than to just write the code, does dry start to fall away? Does, duplication in the code base, maybe that's less important. Maybe, as you have more and more duplicates of functionality, the AI, like LLMs, are really good at dealing with thousands of documents and pulling out information. Maybe it doesn't matter that me and Trace both wrote a class or a function or a controller that does the same thing, because the AI is just going to pick the right method.
Yeah, I think that especially with and I'm not sure how many of us need to drop at the top of the hour, but I want to make sure we get to our 2 examples with plenty of time to talk about them. So I'm curious, like, if you could show us an example of, like, are you practicing promptable architecture in any of your own code? Is there any of that you could kind of pull up and show why you consider this code to be promptable?
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, like at the beginning, we talked a little bit about what we just released around this tool that we're calling Blueprints. And so the idea is that once you have, let's see, where is the share screen? I'm gonna need to zoom in a little bit. Tell me when.
We're there.
How is that? That's good.
Yeah.
Good. So here's, some of the code. We just released this product called, or open source project called Blueprints, which the starting point was, when you have code that follows some of these principles, you can generate it really quickly. And we realized that, a lot of time also when you're working on a new feature, you'll load into memory, or realize somewhere else in the code base you're doing something, you do something similar. And so for this example, here's the index page for our blueprints. And what you're able to do is kind of capture these abstractions or chunks of code. Behind the scenes, it generates a description, generates vector embeddings, and stores it for you. And this, particular layout uses a bunch of Tailwind classes, uses a bunch of different components. But once you've stored that blueprint, you can then use that for thumbs up. You can use that for generation. And so maybe you've got another admin page for showing your index page of customers. And then what you're able to do is kind of just describe it enough. And in request gets made to the blueprint server, we do a vector search for the closest piece of code to what you're trying to do, and then use that as a template to build off of. And so here, it's generated a new index page, used a similar structure, which is a good guess for that, our index page are probably going to look similar. It came up with some ideas for what the components might be of customer view and customer list, which is, good guesses and good starts, but gets us kind of 80% of the way there that we might need to do. And so that's one kind of example there. I've also started to try to talk about, a lot of what I've heard from people saying that, the AI hallucinates and you can't trust it. And one of the things that we're kind of realizing here is that by using a technique similar to this, it almost allows you to target the hallucinations to where you want them and where you expect them. It didn't change the structure, right? The section, the aside, the classes, but it changed the name of the class. It changed the components that we're going to be trying to render. And I've kind of been thinking about it like treating hallucinations as a feature, not a bug, and how can we do that? Partly because I personally don't think that the effort to get these to be 100%, you're never going to get them to 100% accuracy. But what you can do is change yourself and change the way that you are working to just accept that and set that up. Trip out in a safe place. That's right. I like that.
Talk just a little bit more about the hallucinations. Like Claire, I'm not sure if you're. I assume that your audio is still out, but where how understandable does the code need to be by humans? So like somebody's going to need to maintain this code, like you were saying earlier. Which is what's happening now.
Oh, no, I was just playing around. Go ahead, keep going.
It's also like it's because there was some purpose that existed in the prompt, but how, looking at this code, especially coming in a little bit cold, do you know what this is doing? Or I guess I'm curious, like, how readable does your code need to be by humans, or is it just AI that's going to read it going forward and you don't care?
Is that to me or to,
it is?
Oh, that's right, Claire. Yeah, so I think that's
But Claire, I think you're saying that you don't understand like what we're talking about right now. Like what is this?
Can you hear me now? Can I see if my audio is
Yes.
working now? I'm in a different place.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, let's go for more direct communication. Earlier, things like blueprints were talked about, and I said I'm not sure I understand how those words are being used in the context of AI. And the reply was, Claire, sit tight, we'll have code on the screen within 5 minutes. And then the code was there, but I don't know the language, I don't know the context. And then suddenly it was being explained as it was explaining what blueprints were, but I didn't even understand where blueprints were being used. So were the blueprints being fed to the AI to guide the AI, or were the blueprints to explain to the human what the AI was saying? So it feels, maybe I just don't have enough experience in this world, but it feels to me like the talk is at a level that requires or would be beneficial for someone who had a lot of knowledge about the area already, in which case I'm probably not the audience. But I wasn't asking what the code meant, or I didn't even understand where the code was coming from or who its audience was for. I hope that maybe, and if you can't answer it in 5 minutes, then, or whatever, ignore it, just carry on. And I'm not the audience for the talk, which is absolutely fine.
No, that's very helpful, and I will let's see if we can so like I think the way to answer the question, I guess let's to take a step back. The way I look at this tool and is really just packaging up a process of ways that you would generate code with AI, is in order or finding ways to get the AI to solve those problems. To Trace's question, to kicking this off, is why not 100%? Why isn't all of your code or close to 100% of your code written by AI? And we see this as one way to kind of move that percentage up. Makes me realize I do need better code examples here. And from the way I guess I kind of look at it, and Claire, tell me if this is not, I know this could be just, more of my process, but like when I work on a new feature, I might kind of, oh, Trace, go ahead.
I think part of it is like we spent a lot of time, we had like a pretty active discussion by design at the beginning, and I think it's just kind of how we manage our time. It's the first time that we're doing this as a fireside, so I appreciate you're all kind of bearing with our learnings there. But there was like a through line we were trying to generate about like, hey, there are good principles, many of them apply, if you do not. And then when we're talking about kind of promptable architecture and like how do you code for AI, it's a little bit different. Like it's very good if things are extremely loosely coupled. If things are very small, it's very good at generating what the leaf nodes, the single purpose objects, things that don't have a lot of dependencies, like AI is going to be really good for. And there are ways to kind of set those up so you're optimizing so that AI can do well with your code base. And so then when it comes to the notion of blueprints, this came out, Scott, we were talking a while ago about kind of living style guides and kind of examples like, so I'd ask Claire and, Jeff, what sort of examples or templates do you use when you're generating a new piece of code? Like, how much do you get to leverage what you've done before, and how does that presently work for you? Claire, maybe, are you able to answer that?
Are you talking about when using AI or in general?
Just in general, like, how do you use what you've written before to generate what you'll write in the future?
So I work on almost entirely on an open source project that is, since I've retired, my main kind of my main hobby. So I'm very much building on what's there already and learning from what contributors are offering. I was looking to put my hand up, though, to say that I've just realized that the principles, loose coupling and things like that, I didn't understand how you were talking about applying them, but reading between the lines from an earlier comment, I think what you're saying is you need to apply those principles to your own code because you're uploading your own code to the AI, which was not a concept I was aware of. So as an example of the things that you don't even know that you know and other people don't know, that for a future version of the talk, you might, in talking about general principles, it might be really helpful if you could explain the context in which those principles are useful, because it may give people ideas of how to use generative AI that they hadn't even considered. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Thank you. That is very helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's we're looking at these principles through the lens of, as we share this code with the AI, as we try to get the code out from the AI, or get the code we want from the AI, how do these principles look in practice there?
So there's a huge caveat, which is you have to be working at a place that will even allow you to upload your code to an AI, or they have an on-site installation or something like that.
That's, yes, we're definitely kind of like definitely at the early days there. I think that will, I suspect that will likely become more and more organizations, or as the open source models that you can run locally get better, some of those restrictions will fall away. Very similar, I guess, to the shift to cloud, right? I remember like the early days of AWS. A lot of companies had restrictions on using cloud services, and now like it's way more. It's much rarer to find companies that aren't using cloud services than are.
So what I love about the idea of blueprints is that before, like I used to, when I was first learning to code, I would keep snippets of like the best examples that I wanted to follow everywhere. And also like on the was really my first project as a junior developer that I leveled up on when I was at Pivotal Labs, and working with Lee Edwards, Scott, that you mentioned, had a very active live style guide, for anything that touched the front end. And we kept our kind of best examples in places where you could find it. And if you added a new example, you would add it to the style guide. And, are you saying that this code then serves as that style guide, so you don't really need to maintain it? When you have an intent, it can figure out your intent and figure out the best example code from your own code base to use as a model?
That's one aspect, yeah, is that as teams work together, they can, decide. It's like taking the idea of, the line by line style guide, but, to the next level as abstraction by abstraction style guide. And, we're going to use this, we're going to take this, use these things going forward, which I think a lot of teams do implicitly. This by having and calling out and selecting these different abstractions that you're going to use, the AI can generate them. I do see this as almost as a process, though, to evolve it over time. Like as you create every blueprint that you create, every variation on the blueprint can also serve as a blueprint. So for any GEB fans or prototypal inheritance fans, you can also think of these as prototypes that a specific case can serve as a general case for future instantiation and customization.
So for some people that might need to go, and then we'll Paige, how does this work? Do we need to kind of finish the main talk at the top of the hour? Do we keep going and then kind of move to Q&A? How does that work?
So we usually just kind of go until it's over.
Okay.
Right. So if we like it to fit within the hour-ish, and then just so that more people can get everything out of it. But if we want to keep writing some code and talking about examples, if we want to just do Q&A type of stuff, all those are fine.
No, that makes sense. Like is there anyone who's going to need to drop in a couple minutes? If not, so real quick, for Don and people like him, I wanted to ask, so where does testing fit, Scott? Like, how do you TDD, in a AI first or AI enabled world?
Yeah, so I guess I have two separate answers there, depending on what you're actually looking for out of testing. Like, what is the principle, or what is the reason why you're writing these tests first in the first place? And so one is I'm very much on the side that, like, you need to write the test because the tests are the specification. I'm the kind of person that makes sure that the test fails before trusting it. And so we talked about hallucinations and trusting the code from the AI. The AI can just write a test that passes, and you never know if it's actually doing what you want it to do. But also, looking at the tests as prompts themselves, like, this should do this. I think it has, I think it has more importance in that, that you verify that the code that the AI gives you is right. That, the one part of TDD about, like, not testing the implementation also takes on more importance, that you're testing the behavior, because the code from the AI, if it's writing it, I don't think I've ever looked at the output of a compiler. I kind of trust that the code I've written that I compile works the way that I expected it to. And I think similarly for the code that the AI writes, because it's going to be so much faster than me to even just write it, I really just care about that the behavior is right and it's performant enough. And if I write tests that really dictate implementation, I lose that ability because, you know, like we said earlier, it's not going to get things 100%. It's going to jump ahead. But if the behavior is right, the details don't lose importance.
Now that makes sense. So be curious, like, so how are people using blueprints thus far? Like, are you using them to write Sublayer yet?
I am. I mean, the index page example kind of was one of those aha moments. I've actually got a code example here. So we also have an open source for any Rubyists here. Now there's only a few of us left. We've started to put out a Ruby AI gem and some Ruby concepts, or some AI concepts. And this is kind of where we had our first aha moment, which was we've got this concept of a generator, which a generator is roughly, you can think of as a function of string or many strings to string, and with an LLM in the middle. And so this one, for example, is the given a blueprint description, blueprint code, and a description of what you want to do, generate me new code from that. And we can also store that as a blueprint. And I don't know if anybody have an idea for a string to string function we might want to try with an LLM. Shout out.
I mean, uppercase.
I'm sorry.
Simplest thing, uppercase.
Screen real estate is limited here.
I want to bring up that this is a great talk, Trace and Scott. I appreciate the heck out of it, because I have more questions than I have answers.
That's great.
No, we really appreciate that, and we're going to get you
thank you.
a bit. Like, yeah, this is it's crazy.
So what happened? Similar to what we did with the index page, I stored the previous generator as a blueprint. It got vectorized, and then we took the prompt of turn a string into an uppercase string, which LLMs are also pretty good at here. And don't need to go into like the details, but this essentially is a way to kind of structure the output. It generated the prompt, it generated the interface that we have here, and kind of like to what we mentioned earlier around like conciseness being important. The fewer lines, the faster it's going to be at outputting or at giving a response. But and then again, to like kind of target the hallucinations, the interface mostly the same. There's not much room for it to change that. But the place that's different is the prompt, and it came up with a prompt here of you need to ingest a string and output its uppercase equivalent. Your input is this. Remember, the goal is to make the string uppercase. So it even gave itself a little nudge to remember and stay on task. But this is also the kind of where we had the aha moment where like, oh, we need a generator that does X, we need a generator that does Y. What about a generator that does this other thing? And we had like 10, 15 stories in the backlog of like, all right, let's figure out how to do this. And then one of us thought like, I wonder if we could get it to generate it for me. And we did. And then we finished all of our stories before lunch. And that was the big, like, there's something here.
What sort of velocity uptick are you seeing?
Well, that's the problem, is that, like, you know, one of the things that we talk about a lot is, you know, all of the processes that we do are set up and designed around the idea that like developing software is the slowest, most expensive part of the process. And so, you know, we talk to customers, we have customer interview, we figure out what we're going to do, and then we you know, depending on how big of our iterations are, we kind of have, maybe I'm guilty of giving myself away here, but like skipping a few steps to make sure that like, okay, this is roughly enough work in the size of the iteration that we're going to be working in. And then like, you know, you have your iteration, your IPM or whatever, and like you're maybe off by a story or two, but like with enough experience, you get it right. We've realized that like a lot of the before steps are kind of are going to need a lot of work because like as soon as, you know, Trace, if we'll have a conversation, we have an idea, and then like, cool, let's implement that in the next hour. So it's like the problem is more of like, well, what do we actually focus this on, rather than you know, rather than some of the other considerations, rather than velocity, which I don't know. Hey, maybe actually, you know, jumping to a side topic here is that like one of the other principles that's still really important is the idea of small iterations and not trying to do too much all at once, because if you do too much all at once, you don't actually learn anything. You might learn something, but you don't know why you learned it. You know, for the same reason, you know, you'll have an A/B test and you change as little as possible between the two variations to try to figure out what it is. Give 1,000 variations between A and B, you might know which one's better, but you don't know why. You don't know where to go from there. And so even though AI is going to make us faster at software development, doing small pieces of work and getting that work into customers' hands is still very important.
Lotta, I know you have a question. Loved your talk last month too. So thanks for engaging. What do you ask?
Oh, thanks so much. I think, Scott, you mentioned that you guys created something like a team of AI software developers with roles and product owner and so on. Is that right?
Yeah, at RDM, as part of this product management tool. I'll post a link to it in the chat, but under the hood, one of the things that we've done.
Sorry, was it you that mentioned it, Trace?
I mentioned that, but I think, Scott, you're doing something similar. It's a pretty common technique. Can you tell me more why you did that and what kind of results you got from it? Now I'm super curious what it led to. The reason we did that is so for the tool that we were working on, and after this I can bring up the latest version. It kind of went dark and then it went live, I think 2 weeks ago. And the goal of it was to you know, take an idea that might come up in, say, a big room planning meeting or in a scoping for us as a consultancy, and to flesh out the implications to get alignment among stakeholders that this is what we think we're going to build, and to do like a, you know, basically automate an agile inception so that you can go from an idea to a shovel-ready backlog. And so that process, you know, requires the, you know, the stakeholders who are present, as well as the, you know, the teams that are going to be responsible for doing the work across the different skill sets of leadership, product engineering, design, testing, if it's its own function, and, you know, any SMEs, whether it's compliance or legal, security, whatever. And people are going to have their different aspects of it and have different debates, the results of which would yield the, you know, the decisions. There might be a architectural decision record or some such that would be part of that process. And so because we were kind of naive on this, and from a Shuhari sense, we would just say, hey, let's take the process that we follow to do this today and put it into an LLM to try to see if that gives us better results and, you know, clear epics and user stories. And we felt that it did. A nice side effect is that you could actually see the debates and kind of crack it open under the hood and see the work that went into a particular decision, so that you could say, yes, I agree with this decision, or no, we need to revise it.
So like a way to make AI just a little bit less magical.
Yeah, it was to make it less magical, but to influence its results. because if, here it came up with this decision, like, I mean, right before this call, I used AI to create student groups for the class that I'm teaching. So not a code task, though there were some code tasks embedded in it, and I had a whole bunch of constraints. And so I needed to keep, reordering the constraints, and it couldn't meet all of them. So which ones were the most important? So there's like kind of some iteration in the steps, and it was actually interesting. Like, it explained everything very step by step for me, and one of the steps was just wrong, so we had to kind of go back there. And similarly, if you're trying to have AI make these decisions, and I think going forward it's not going to be like emulating what humans did, but that was a good start.
So did it come up with useful decisions?
So in terms of what I did today, so I had just gotten to generate the lists, but I agree with the prioritization. I think it's going to work. And the good news is, because it showed its work, like, for assigning groups, like some people want to work together, some don't, some groups want to stick, some don't. We're trying to split up across countries and all these different things. Again, not a code thing, but I think it did a pretty good job of forming the groups in a way that not only is explainable to me, but it's also explainable to the students if they ask.
Thank you.
Trace, quick question for you. How long did it take you to have the AI give you an acceptable list for that task versus how long would it have taken you to do it normally?
Oh, I mean, I feel like this has saved a ton of time. Like, I've never taught a class before, and I've never formed groups before. And I got all this information from all these other teachers at Columbia, and it's like completely fraught. Because the students really complain. Some people are working too hard, some people are not. I'm getting messages from all these students. You can't have them form their own groups because there's some people that have special accommodations and they're going to feel rejected. Like, there are all these kind of different considerations, and I could have just picked randomly, which is what my co-instructors wanted to do, and I just felt like I can hyper focus on problems, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I'm happy to actually share out the chat that I used for it, but it skipped a whole bunch of steps, and also I had different spreadsheets that I was trying to do. I had it, basically, I needed to do a right outer join from spreadsheets, but not SQL, but with these other constraints, and I told it to do it, and it just absolutely did it. So it felt faster than me, but I don't have an apples to apples comparison. I do know for the, in terms of like doing, the other tool that I use from Artium called Apex that would, do a scoping and try to make some decisions. That when you have the right people in the room to make a decision, say, yes, we're doing this thing, if you can get that decision done in the room before they leave and get that rubber stamp, you're off to the races. And you have to wait to go back to them. It's a month of telephone tag. So the issue wasn't so much the time that I was taking, to do the task myself. It was meeting a window to, be able to form a more accelerated process. And that's where, when these processes are changing, it's, with AI, like it's going to be all about like alignment and communication, and much less about the code, because the code's going to write itself.
I would, if you would go back, there was a question earlier, or a comment earlier, and I'd love to know if you have an easy answer. And that's right now, when I work with ChatGPT-4 or whatever other code gen AI tool, I either have to paste the code in. Like, is there a way to say like everything in this project, or like everything in this GitHub repository, like how do we ask it to look at all of the files that could be affected by what we're writing versus just the current file? Does it exist?
So I've got two answers for this. I've got two answers for everything. One, Gemini just came out. Gemini 1.5 just came out. They have a really cool interface where you can upload a folder. And I did some experiments where I was adding a new API, and instead of, some of the processes of go to the API docs, copy the important parts, put those into the prompt, I just cloned a gem for using that API and threw the folder up into the prompt. We're like, we're using this gem, add this make this call, like add this functionality, and it took care of it. The other side to that answer is that ideally that need kind of falls away as we start to, move in the direction of writing code that the AI is, we're leaning on the AI writing the code. More and more of that we do. Ideally, the less and less context it's going to need to actually accomplish those tasks. And so there's definitely a stopgap here with the, Google's just throw a folder up.
And I asked because like, okay, I have an account object and I'm at like, please get the user name and address for this account or whatever, and I have a user class elsewhere and that it has a full name method. But what happens now is I'm seeing I get user.getName, or what it has no understanding that there's an actual method called full name on that other user class, and like then going back to my earlier comment, then I have to go refactor it and go, no, I'm not going to write a new function called getName. I'm going to use the one that exists. And like, I'd love to see much more of a context understanding as a whole around a project when I'm using an AI gen tool. And
so I have I have a very controversial fix for that.
Okay.
Which is almost like 20% serious and 80% more of just like proof of concept joke. But I'm happy to share that if you're curious.
I'm curious too, because that was originally my comment.
So this is a little bit around, one of the things I think coming from a Ruby background is I've been digging much more into the dynamic nature and being able to kind of like one approach is focus on the prompt, focus on giving it all the information so that you can get exactly what you want back from the LLM. Another approach is to change the way that you build and structure your software so that whatever the LLM gives you back is the right thing. And let's go ahead and share the screen again.
Scott, you talk about this all the time. Like,
yeah.
I don't know how much of a joke this actually is.
What's that?
I don't know how much of a joke this is. Like, I think this could be this is one of the things.
Well, it's entertaining to me. So I, been a Rubyist for a long time and really enjoy seeing I really like seeing reactions to some of this. But so here's a demo that I have of a really simple chess application, going to store the rook piece as a blueprint. These pieces, we're going to reuse them. They are one example of being loosely coupled, same interface, and so we want to generate a queen piece, and actually we can run the queen spec, see that queen doesn't exist. We can generate the queen piece given the rook blueprint, and see here.
Oh, wait, what did you just do to make that happen?
I stored the rook blueprint and then wrote out a queen chess piece, and it generated the queen piece based on a rook. And like we were talking about before, kind of targeting hallucinations, the rook, all it had was horizontal DERs, and queen also has diagonal DERs. And so it threw that in there, and we can go ahead and run.
That you used to get that to show up on screen. Was
What's
it
that?
was that a hotkey that you used just to paste it in, or?
Yeah, so we've got actually editor plugins for blueprints for Vim, VS Code, Sublime, and IntelliJ right now. But you know, the server's running locally, the API is open, it's all open source. So whatever interface or hotkeys you'd like to use, it's kind of up to you. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So back to the Queen tests. We run the tests again, and it didn't include the piece and slidable modules. And so if we running out of space here, run the tests yet again, diagonal dirs isn't defined, and that's defined in slidable. We have the constant diagonal dirs, but for whatever reason we named it X dirs because we wanted to represent it visually. So like you were saying, Paige, you know, I don't want to change where do I make this change, right? Bishop probably uses X dirs, and so do I want to go and change Bishop and change this other thing? But what you're able to do really easily in Ruby is hook into method missing, and LLMs are very good at recognizing context. And so we created a module, which is really hard to say, synonym, which hooks into method missing, gives the LLM the list of methods that are available, and tells it and asks it, hey, this method was called, this message was sent to this object. Is there anything that seems similar that the user might be trying to do? And fails for some other reasons. I should include that in here. And so now it'll run and make the call. Hopefully, it's always fun live demoing generative AI because you never know what you're going to get. And you never know how the network is going to respond. Let's see, what do we get? Well, it's still called the method. we changed the error. We've got a different error. We got another example here that might be a little bit simpler. So in Ruby, the date object has W day as the returns the day of the week, and my Tmux panes are here. Returns the day of the week, and so we have this output. The day of the week is right. We're going to get no method error day of week. If we monkey patch synonym into date, we can right. We get that to work by deciding we don't want to call W day, we want to call date.day of week. Silly examples, but to your point, you know, if it returns, camel cased versus snake cased method, you can, if you've got good tests, you know, have it still work and kind of give you, maybe, I don't know if you're running the test suite, give you a report of all the places where, hey, this, you know, we tried to use this method, we use this method in place and the test pass. And it takes care of that.
Yossian,
we're still.
You had a question?
Yes. There is one thing we talk about a lot, which is giving it more code context. And it works very well with what we show here, but it's mostly because we have, in a way, kind of naive examples, right? Domains that everyone will understand, that are very widely used in smaller and non-too-complicated application. But when you write code inside a real production application, most of the time, the context is not limited to the code. You have to bring in all your understanding of the domain, and this is what you base your all the decision that you write in the code on, right? It's what you have in your head rather than everything that you wrote, and there is a lot of implicit that we base our decision on, and I hardly see how this can be really compatible with the use of LLM in critical settings.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess, you know, I look at it a little bit like, you know, every technology isn't necessarily going to be great for every application. I think earlier on we talked about, like, I used to work at Groupon, and you know, it was Ruby on Rails and JavaScript, and like there were bugs that were, you know, crashed occasionally. And so like you know, I mean, even the industry had the whole idea of move fast and break things for the startup industry anyway. Not a great principle for aircraft control software, for pacemaker software, right? I want that to be very stable, and I want that to be very reliable. And at the same time, you know, for the applications that it can work, I think we have kind of come up with principles and come up with patterns that work well, or abstractions that are easy for each of us to understand, share with our teams, that there will absolutely be new abstractions that we find that work well with LLMs, and ways to present those and get that information out of our head. And that's basically been a lot of my focus, is like, what are these abstractions, and once we find some, what can we do with them?
Thank you.
It's been so absolutely right now, current state of AI code gen for loading context, having one file, maybe a few, is limiting. We all know that, including the people that wrote the AI code generators. We're already starting to see that context grow. That's going to happen. That's a bar to entry. This is V1. So I'm not fixated on that. My thing is trying to figure out, you know, you're talking, Scott, that the example that I'll go with is dry, do not repeat yourself, and tie it in with Paige's example of a customer. I'll expand that just a little bit more. Say you have a customer, you have a count, you have an order, very common for many places, and it's in a database, and you're saying, well, code duplication, don't worry about it. It's fine because the AI is generating this code. So you're saying every instance that we create this is going to create a new connection to the repository and go create all this stuff to get us the simple answer. Say Paige wants the address of Mike Smith. I want the order number 1253. Cody wants the address of his neighbor down the street. You know, all these would be individual code bits. Yes, that it can easily generate those one-offs. How does it unite them so that you don't have to then say, hey, AI, I've got a new database, plug it into these million different files that are making all these custom orders?
So I guess a couple, you know, there's a bit of an assumption that, like, you know, that I guess the starting point being like, add these to a file. You know, where we're kind of going down is it's almost like treating code ephemerally. And you know, we might generate this one-off. We might, you know, this is a new code path. This is something new. We don't have it. And so it may end up being, you know, for the first 10 times it goes down this code path, we don't have anything. And then as we see the results of it, we start to like pave the cow path here, and store it, and then focus on it. Then, you know, oh, this is actually needs to this is fine for n equals 10, but like n equals 10 billion, we need to optimize this, and we need to kind of drop down to the lower level and fix it, and you know, apply it. But like, we kind of expands the option for what does this code need to do, and has it proved its usefulness long term?
Okay. So the light bulb went off. What we're seeing right now, the artifacts that we humans do for coding with a project, with files, with classes, with those things, are the current state. With AI code gen, over time, possibly, or what you're envisioning, is that you would go and you would say, hey, computer, create me a new project. I need to have a customer, an account, and orders. And here's my inventory. You'd read off the inventory or somehow get in there. And it would generate all the code maybe for that and say, I need to create an order for Paige for a new Nissan Leaf. And it would do that one off. And then I'd say, Cody wants to buy a house. And so Cody gets a house. This is his new address. And Trace here, he wants an order of bananas and some more kale because he just finished off his kale salad. And it would generate those things. But thinking of it like we do, these files, yes, it might create those, but over time, it would evolve and merge those into effective use, an effective application.
Right. And I wrote a note down. You'd mentioned Smalltalk earlier, and that's like one of the areas I've been digging into. Just got introduced to Glamorous Toolkit, and one of the things that they do, they have a bunch of different views for a piece of data, a piece of code, and like I'm gonna butcher. I'm still so new. I'm gonna butcher like their principle, but like really struck me that like they're focused on kind of writing the code for those views. But like if you can come with your intent, we can figure out your intent, or you can describe what you're trying to intend to do. You can generate those views, that generate those interactions on that data that you have in real, as these models get faster in real time. Right now, there's a little bit of a wait, but yeah, I think exactly that of these things start to become a little much more flexible, rather than having to design the flexibility by hand upfront.
Right, and in that application the AI application that you're generating, it would know to refactor over time. It would say, hey, it would know the scope and the context of everything that you'd asked it to, because it's its own contained memory space that would say, oh yeah, now I see that this and this is something similarly named, and maybe come back with a question. Hey, Cody buying a new house has an address, and hey, Paige wanting that shipped to him, they both have an address. Is that something, or it would probably manage it under the covers. But eventually it would come up, is that a meta construct? Is that something bigger that you want to track or something? So yeah, it's thinking about it like that is a huge brave new world where we're limited by our constraints of, well, this is how you have a program now. It's this thing. You're not talking a house. You're talking about cloud. No, clouds loaded in our industry. A construct of steam vapor, water mist that is floating somewhere. Yeah.
To maybe jump in for a sec, because the light bulb kind of went off in my head. So we're talking about the word refactoring, and really refactoring is a tool or a practice, I guess, to make it easier to change the code. If the LLM's able to change the code easily, like we're saying, you were talking about addresses. We actually need to change addresses to do something slightly different. So every place that we've maybe introduced or the LLM has introduced the duplication, now it has to go ahead and change that. Well, if it's able to do that easily, then
when there's and Scott, this is what what Aldrich was working on a little bit before he joined Mechanical Orchard, and I paired in with him a few times, was just to translate everything to domain-driven design, and just basically to have a specification for what you need. And then whenever there's a new requirement, just the code would get regenerated in its entirety. And so there's some sort of, and we've gone back and forth. There was that one guy that we were with at that conference in DC that was doing that too, that would have an interim specification language we're just trying to do. And I know, Scott, I don't think you were a fan of that sort of thing, but that's one way to keep, making iterative changes where, the code may not be the spec, and just, change a thing, regenerate everything, change a thing, regenerate everything. You got good tests, you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, I love the experimentation. I'm excited about the experimentation. I am going down a personally different path. But it's funny, like, the term refactoring, and I actually got into an argument with a friend about this, that like there are two different let's see, how did he explain it? There are two different ways, two different things that people are talking about when they talk about refactoring. One is code hygiene, pulling, extract method, extract class, and that kind of thing. And then there's also changing the object model, right? And I think LLMs are really good at the mechanical stuff. Like we've had IDE refactoring of the like mechanical pieces for a long time. LLMs are really bad at the conceptual, like what are these building blocks and what are these moving pieces that we're working with? What are these abstractions? And I think that's the unlock here, and like what got me pretty excited about Blueprints is that like if you put that effort into an object model that works well with LLMs, you get a lot out the other end, and then you can turn on the mechanical stuff that we've had in our IDEs for a long time of just like make this more maintainable. So yeah.
Yeah.
One of my many soapboxes.
And for the record, when most of the time when I've been playing around with AI code gen, I'm using familiar code katas, but I'm renaming them so it's not able to anchor them with something else. For instance, when I do FizzBuzz, I'm doing plain train. Yeah, same problem, just different words. And I've actually found for 4.0 and some others, they don't link them together. It's not drawing from the FizzBuzz library of everything. Same thing with Gilded Rose, just changing some of the names in it actually makes it so it's this whole new code base. So that's something to try. Because a lot of this is, okay, if I'm doing FizzBuzz, a lot of people have done FizzBuzz.
Right.
But how about a new code base or something new or completely different? So
it's always going to get you more pure data. Like, a lot of people, especially from our crowd, were using the Game of Life because Code Retreat is a canonical example. And there's so much prior art out there that you're not getting a real experience. So, Scott, I prepared a bunch of questions, but we're so far past 2 o'clock. So just kind of curious what everyone else wants to know. I'm fizz-buzzed right now.
Why don't we do a quick wrap up and I'll finish the recording. Then we can continue to have conversations and questions that come up and that sort of thing. Does that work?
Yeah.
All right, fabulous. Well, I really appreciate Trace and Scott, both of you coming, and I've gotten quite a bit out of this, and I hope everyone else has. I appreciate all the questions and everybody that showed up to this. Are you doing talks or any place we can see either of you in the future? If we want to come back with other questions and, I wanted to ask about this type of thing.
We're pretty reachable.
I have and on my to-do list joining the Slack, so I'll be in the Slack too if anybody wants to reach out and say hi.
Fabulous.
Or ask questions. Yeah.
Fabulous.
One offer that we have for the group is just to do a 30-minute lunch and learn on this topic. So you can, reach out to me, reach out to Scott. I have our emails in the chat. I'll put them again. But one of we're very kind of curious, like we're ideating, perhaps a larger workshop, but we don't want to be a solution looking for a problem. We're kind of curious how people are thinking about it, where they're stuck. and specifically kind of where they're stuck in their own professional context. And so the idea is just to have it be a bit of a, an intro and then a Q&A, and just ask your questions, or what are your frustrations for, for incorporating AI in the loop into your current process, in your context, in your culture. And, we'd be happy to answer questions.
That sounds excellent. That sounds excellent. Thank you. A bit of a note, I want to say Matt Wynn is going to talk about dancing with technical debt next Thursday, April 25th. So please join us for that. And again, thank you both very much. We really enjoyed this.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Trace, for thinking of me for this. Appreciate all the questions.